I think that one of the hardest things was my brain was saying, this is going to be really, really bad and you have to make dramatic changes here. And that means that a lot of people are going to be impacted. My other side of my brain was like all these people that have helped and tried and given their best. But we made a very aggressive decision to make so many roles, hundreds of roles, 500 roles redundant.
Hello and welcome back to the 5THWAVE podcast. I'm Jeffrey Young, Editor-in-Chief of coffee business magazine 5THWAVE. And the voice you just heard was Nick Stone, founder of Bluestone Lane. Bluestone Lane is a cafe chain in North America with over 50 locations, serving Antipodean brunches and specialty coffee. Nick and I had a conversation back in July, a few months into the COVID shutdowns and during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests. And in my opinion, this interview was exceptional. Nick is a leading light in the hospitality sector, and this interview gave me insight into how an impressive leader like Nick was coping in the face of COVID, the worst crisis that the hospitality sector has seen in generations. Some parts of this interview made it into our first episode of 5THWAVE about the long-term impact of COVID on the cafe sector. But there was so much more left on the cutting room floor that was bursting with insights on how we can all be better people managers and better decision makers. So in between our fortnightly episodes, we're going to be releasing full interviews with some of our guests where we believe it's worth it. So grab yourself a coffee, sit back, and enjoy this full conversation with Nick Stone. Delighted to welcome Nick Stone, who's the CEO and founder of Bluestone Lane. Really an amazing and very impressive brand out of North America, here to the podcast series for 5THWAVE. So welcome, Nick.
Thanks, Jeffrey. A pleasure to be here.
I mean, before we get into the topic, which is mainly the impact of COVID-19 on the business landscape for coffee operators, I think it'd be really interesting to get a bit of background about Bluestone Lane and also a little bit of background on yourself as well.
Sure. So I'm originally from Melbourne in Australia, and I landed in the States, in New York City, in late 2010 to actually go to business school. I was studying as part of my MBA in the States, and I was able to be transferred with my job in banking and finance. And while I was studying, it was apparent to me how different the coffee culture was in the US versus Australia, which is a land of independence. There's very few chains that dominate there. It's very much an independent premium model with a huge focus not only on quality coffee, but the total cafe experience, which is high quality, fresh, healthy food, personalized service, curated atmosphere and aesthetic, and then, just this intangible, which we describe as being a local, not a customer, where you walk in and there's a reciprocal relationship between the proprietor and the customer, that you know each other's names. And when you're a local, the owner knows your name, face, and order, and it makes you feel special and recognized and safe. So I started kicking around some ideas about developing, one or two Australian-style coffee shops and cafes. I could clearly see that this younger customer was interested in more premium artisan quality products, and there'd been some investment made in a few of the forefathers of premium coffee in the States. And, eventually, finally in 2013, we opened our first store in a subterranean basement in Midtown Manhattan. We opened 12 over the preceding 3 years, and then I jumped full-time, so left banking. And since then, we opened another 40. So we currently have 51 coffee shops and cafes. We have two concepts. Coffee shops very much focused on central business districts, smaller footprint, orientated around coffee. And then we have cafes, which operate more like restaurants, more focused on human connection and service. And we're in 8 markets. And this was my first ever hospitality experience. I never spent a day in hospitality. By way of background, I mentioned that I was in investment banking for 11 years, but prior to that, I was actually a sportsman. I played Australian rules football for 6 years. I got drafted professionally when I was in year 12, my final year of high school, back in 1999, which is many, many moons ago. And, I've been full-time at Bluestone since mid-2016. So I've had 3 careers already. all completely different, but they have the commonality around being a part of high performance teams. I love being part of teams. I love working with people. I love challenges and trying to innovate, and the curiosity that goes with either working with clients and providing advice and trying to resolve some of their problems. And now in the case of Bluestone Lane, working on how we can grow and build our brand. And right now, how do we navigate this pandemic, which really is an existential crisis for small and medium-sized businesses. And unfortunately, it's continuing to accelerate in the US.
I'm assuming you've had to make some pretty tough decisions to keep the show on the road. Yeah, I'd be interested to know what's the magnitude of impact on the business and what have you had to deal with?
Well, Bluestone Lane is the largest premium coffee brand influenced by the Australian coffee culture. So we would be the largest coffee export out of Australia. And in the States, we're really the second largest in the top echelon. Blue Bottle has, about 80, 90 stores and we're just over 50. Then there's just like a host of independents. And, we employed pre-COVID around 650 people. And when the impact of COVID started to come through, I was in New York, and it was quite apparent on March 13th that the world was going to change in a very dramatic way. We were planning for it. Our board was quite proactive in saying that this is something that could be very, very damaging for our business and the economy, and we need to plan for it. So when I was in New York on March 11th, we had a meeting where we'd worked on the 4 phases, phase 1 being some small changes and some cost savings, and then through to sort of phase 4, which was some pretty draconian measures and real heavy austerity, lots of job losses, lots of store closings, complete change in business operations. And then as a consequence of the dramatic decline, our revenue dropped 90% week on week. We were doing just over, around $1 million US. And this was in February. And February is a very cold month. And we normally get a 30% pickup when the weather improves because we have outdoor dining. So we were doing really well, and we were going to grow about 50 to 60% year on year, and we had been doing anywhere from 60 to 100%. Noting that we only opened our first store in mid 2013, and as I said, when I went full time in mid 2016, we only had 12 locations. So it had been a heavy growth period, and we were actually slowing the unit count. But we were going to focus more on same-store sales and the profitability of the total firm, and some of the new areas we're investing in: digital, CPG, e-commerce, wholesale. But it was a 90% drop, so it was catastrophic. It was absolutely heartbreaking. We had to make redundant the majority of the staff. Those who remained, about 100, worked in the stores that we kept open purely for 3 reasons. First, for some sense of continuity of the brand. Secondly, to give our locals some hope that we're going to be, continue to fulfill our mission of being our locals' genuine daily escape, so they can escape from their apartment. And then, thirdly, so we can continue to contribute to community initiatives like Fuel for our healthcare heroes, in which we donated about 40,000 cups of coffee across 5 states and over 35 hospitals. So it was heartbreaking, and it still is. We've now up to opening 20 stores, but our sales volume is only about 23% of what it should be based on budget, and maybe 25, 26%, or maybe closer to 30% pre-COVID. So absolutely heartbreaking, and we've been dealt with challenge after challenge, because it's not just the dramatic decline in demand, it's the start and stop of the way that governments have said you can operate like this, and then California said no you can't, and New York says you can open for dine-in at a limited capacity on July 6th, and then on July 2nd they said indoor dining's banned indefinitely. And then we've had a couple of staff test positive for COVID and the challenges around that. And then obviously we had another unprecedented event, being the tragic killing of George Floyd, and how that acted as a nationwide catalyst for Black Lives Matter sort of movement and a movement towards greater focus on systemic racial issues and racial equality. Certainly, obviously, most of the protesting was extremely peaceful, and we're highly supportive or an ally of equality and Black Lives Matters. But, some of our stores were disrupted by some rioting, and that also acted, I think, as somewhat of a headwind to get some momentum to open. So it's extremely challenging, and it's a day-to-day proposition. And yeah, it's hard to explain to people that, it's tried to encapsulate it all because it's been so complicated. I've probably never dealt with anything as complicated in my life than the last 4 months.
Yeah. I think very few business people will ever see anything like this, save for war, which we hope will never happen. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to see where the future's going to be. Anything could change. Second waves, etc. What long-term changes do you think this might have?
The changes have been dramatic. So, as an example, on March 16th, Bluestone Lane, the stores that we kept open, 14 of our 51 stores, they all went mobile only exclusively. So we have not accepted a credit card payment or a cash payment since that day. The only way in which you can order is via 100% mobile contactless experience. So you order directly from our app for pickup, and you also order directly from our app for native delivery. We are on third-party delivery sites, but we've now moved it all within our app. So that was a transformative change, and it led from our loyalty sort of program, having about 50,000 registered participants to now over 100,000 in our loyalty program, which is pretty incredible. And the adoption of order ahead and contactless has been extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. We have very few customers or locals coming up and saying, can I pay at the point of sale? Can I pay via credit card? Everyone has rallied around it because we focused and we made a very clear stance that health and safety of our team and our locals is the absolute priority. So well before some of the biggest chains out there, let's say the biggest one starting with S, they were still letting customers into the store in March. We drew a line in the sand and said from March 16th, no customer would be allowed in any of our stores, and no one would be allowed in, even suppliers, to protect the health of our team. And it's been really well adopted, and we actually invested a substantial amount in the technology for our cafe experience, which really is being focused on service and human connection. It still is focused on human connection, but we have to reduce the amount of service from our team. And how that's been now enabled is purely through technology. So it's reservation only, so it enables us to manage the venue with limited seating, adhering to the 6 feet social distancing rules between tables, adhering to the contact tracing protocols. So you have to have a Bluestone Lane app. You download it. It connects to a reservation platform. When you arrive, you check in. You're asked your health check questions. You're then greeted by the concierge. They're taken to your table. You scan a barcode on your phone. It automatically opens the app, and then you order directly from the app, and the food is delivered to you, and payment and tip and service charges all through one sort of simple, expedited, frictionless experience. And it all goes through one loyalty program, which we never offered pre-COVID. So technology to drive efficiencies, to manage risk, I don't think will ever recede. This will without a doubt be the way forward, and you're seeing what Starbucks are investing in with mobile only as well. Secondly, without a doubt, real estate changes across the entire spectrum. Retail, real estate, I think all real estate, office through to retail, dramatically changes. You're going to see such a bigger focus on amenity retail. It was already moving that way, but it's going to accelerate. It's certainly areas in which they rely on tremendous, commuter traffic and, tremendous office occupancy are going to be more impacted negatively. There's going to be a huge push towards work from home and suburban locations. That's what we're focused on. We only have one suburban location. We have two actually, one in the Hamptons and one in Los Altos, which is in the Bay Area of San Francisco. They're both doing exceptionally well. That's where we'll be focused on. And then, I think that ultimately, like, we were dealing with a challenge pre-COVID that the labor market was so incredibly tight. In New York City, the official unemployment rate was below 3%. So I think there was certainly a huge war for talent. There was a lot of competition. There'd been extraordinary economic conditions for a long time. And there was probably too much competition, too many stores, and there was just not enough people. And that obviously changes dramatically. So I think that we can focus on bringing in high quality talent, spending more on training, and having far more productive staff that we can reward, and by using technology to bridge some of the more antiquated processes that we had people doing. And it's just a better way to do it given the focus on health and safety. And I think the consumer preferences have changed and they will not come back. 60 days to learn a new habit. I think order ahead, I think mobile only is going to be well and truly the way that people think about getting a whole range of products. And I do believe coffee will be one of those. So long-winded answer, but the world will never come back. My view is that consumer behavior will change forever, but there will always be parts of the hospitality chain that are heavily focused on service and human connection, fine dining, for example. But I think the rest will use technology to drive efficiencies because the cost structure is going to be so challenged.
What would you say some of the biggest sort of leadership challenges that you've had to face?
I think early on, my analytical brain, and obviously I love numbers, I love data. I was, a banker for 11 years in a few countries. I can look at things in a quantitative lens. But from a qualitative side, like, I'm a very caring person. I love being part of the team. I'm so thankful for people that have played their part in making Bluestone the brand it is. I think that one of the hardest things was my brain was saying, this is going to be really, really bad, and you have to make dramatic changes here, not just tinker on the edges. You have to make fundamental wholesale changes. And that means that a lot of people are going to be impacted. And I think my other side of my brain was like, this is just all these people that have helped and tried and given their best. But ultimately, I had to make a decision that my obligation as CEO was to save the company. I have to have a company in which people can come back to. So we made a very aggressive decision to make so many roles, hundreds of roles, 500 roles redundant. And what we did was we were able to pay out entitlements, leave, sick leave, and we were able to provide redundancy if we made the decision right now. There was certainly no guarantee for any redundancy if we didn't rip the Band-Aid off in a very aggressive way, and that's what I decided to do. So I think, having discussions with people that had worked with you for 2 years or 5 years that they suddenly don't really have a role in COVID was heartbreaking. When you're the founder, it's not just purely business. Clearly, it's like a member of your family, and a lot of the team members early on are teammates, are a part family. That's an extremely hard thing. I think managing the health and safety protocols, managing if someone in your team tests positive, we had that. We had a staff member test positive at a couple of different stores, and how you then have to quarantine. We took a very aggressive stance. Anyone who was exposed, that team member was put in quarantine for 2 weeks, fully paid. We had to bring in a whole new, set of staff. Those complexities are huge. And then obviously, moving to 100% mobile and digital, all the comms piece and the education we had to provide with our locals, which was massive as well. And finally, pre-COVID, we were only 5% of our total sales was delivery. It was a very, very small part of the business. So we didn't really focus on it. Delivery became over 50% of the business within 1 month. So onboarding all the different platforms, having it all go through our one system, our Olo Rail system, there was a huge sprint there. The team did an exceptional job, but it was complicated when you suddenly go from 5% to 50%, in a couple of week period. It's going to provide a lot of challenges.
What about your expansion plans? Is this sort of putting the brakes on any further expansion, at least for the foreseeable future?
We cut all new store openings when COVID arrived. We had to save cash in any way, shape, or form we could, and it all adds up. And my focus now is to continue to weather the storm. There's Some of the locations we've opened that were extremely profitable and successful pre-COVID, we've opened them up and to see how they've performed, and they've performed actually in quite challenged way. People are just not back to work yet, and people have left the city. I think that will change in September, October after Labor Day. But, until I get that time, I don't really have a set view on expansion, with the exception of I do believe that suburbs are going to be very attractive. I'm working on a roadmap to focus on suburban locations that have linkage to the mass urban centers we're in. So parts of New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, the outer LA through to anywhere from between San Diego and LA between San Francisco. I think there's, tremendous opportunity. But it just depends on how we weather it. And like most retail, the biggest risk probably in their business right now that they can try and influence, because I do think traffic is challenged. Like, you need consumer confidence to feel good, and that's linked to, the health of society improving and the virus sort of abating, is landlords and negotiating your fixed cost base. And that was the huge push to try and get to a variable cost base to reduce the operating leverage. And that is what I took on just myself with our general counsel. And that is extremely complicated. We have 50 discrete landlords, all have different views on the relationship that you have, the contract you share. And if I'm able to move that to something that's sustainable and palatable for the long term, which the majority of the landlords are aligned that way, some are not, which has certainly been frustrating. We'll make it through, and we should have a chance to relook at growth at some stage. But it's still a fight for survival. There's no way about it. I think we're only a quarter way through, unfortunately. We're going to have to deal with fall and winter. And if you think about it right now, the only way to buy product in the markets that we operate in, California, New York, Massachusetts, and Jersey, it's curbside pickup or you dine outside. Now, what's going to happen in fall when it starts snowing? I think there's some real challenges that we're concerned about. And then what's going to happen to commuting? People are just going to prefer to work from home rather than, dealing with driving in the snow or dealing with trains, because obviously they're going to restrict capacity on subway and on trains. So some huge challenges to navigate, and we're being extremely conservative. And that's why it was so hard, because you knew that you had to reduce your cost base by 80%. And that meant that the biggest investment we make is in our people. It's over 35% of total revenue. So it was heartbreaking. Yeah.
Well, you've got your technology for delivery and pickup, click and collect, etc. Any movement on e-commerce of, say, coffee for home, beans or?
Yeah, that jumped dramatically. It's up period on period about 400%. But e-commerce is still small relative to retail. And I think it seems very alluring, and it makes sense. Have coffee delivered to home, and coffee's, a decent sized category on Amazon. But it is competitive, and it's extremely price sensitive. And the cost of acquisition can be very, very high. So there's not that many coffee brands out there that really do north of $1 to $2 million in sales on e-com. There's a lot that do 500,000, but very few that do sort of 1 to 2 million. The growth has been strong. We will continue to invest into it, and we're looking at opportunities there and partnerships. I would say for us, I think capsules is something that we're really heavily focused on, especially in biodegradable format. We've been spending a lot of time and research understanding that market. That's something that I think that we could be moving into, high quality and biodegradable and Nespresso and Keurig compatible. Nespresso certainly the priority. I think what's going to be interesting about e-commerce is with coffee shops, the way delivery is working, instead of buying coffee from Amazon or buying directly from the roastery, it might be much more efficient just to get coffee delivered from your local cafe. And I think avoiding that whole packaging shipping. So if you're ordering avocado smash and a brekkie board or a chia pudding and an iced magic, You could just throw a bag of beans in there and they could grind them for you. It could be whole bean, and it could be a lot more fresh and just a more efficient transaction than ordering online. So that's something that we're looking at, is converting, a lot of our stores to really more distribution, and maybe that'll cannibalize a bit of e-com. But I think a lot of brands are going to be looking at that because it could be cheaper for them, far cheaper than doing shipping on e-com.
And then just on a personal level, to wrap up here, this whole experience must have made you think differently as a human being and maybe impact on your own life and how you see the world.
There are a lot of silver linings. The net result is without a doubt a tremendous negative and challenge for the world, but there are some silver linings. And my mum and my wife, both early on when I was looking at Bluestone Lane, thinking that my business baby was on its knees and could die, they reinforced there are silver linings. You just got to look for them. And there have been tremendous ones. I think for myself, I spent 120 days away from the family last year. And we live on the West Coast in Los Angeles, and I was flying to New York every second week. I missed a lot of quality time. I really did. I have 2 young kids and one that's only 11 months old. And he was born in August, and what's been fantastic is the deep relationship that I've really accelerated with my kids by spending every day at home, playing with them, doing bed every night, family dinner every night, not going out with anyone else. Really, you're only just socializing within your family construct. That I do think's been wonderful. I certainly reorientated around what my priorities are in life and what I want to achieve. And it's given me a great appreciation of also like the challenges of being a single parent when I was away so much. And it's very demanding and exhausting. And my wife, gave up the majority of her career to stay at home and bring up our kids, and sacrifices she's made. So I think a huge part that we feel sad about is the ability to get home to Australia is restricted. Right now, you can't fly to where we're from in Melbourne. You then have to do quarantine if you fly in other states for 2 weeks in a hotel. And that's scary. That's scary when your parents and your family, you can't just get home easily. I think a lot of Australians feel that when they're overseas. It's given me also a great appreciation of like how I can be more productive in my role and how I can use technology to continue to maintain great relationships with the team, my direct reports. And it's made me think about how do you build that and continue to build that organizational culture virtually. And that is a really challenging one. You can call town hall, get everyone in a room, and you can talk and, have a come together moment where everyone feels aligned and excited. But, now you do it all virtually and digitally. How do you get the same resonance? And that's given me I've had to read a lot and reflect and solicit a lot of advice. And, I think I'm improving as a leader, but I've certainly been tested, and, I'm just trying to continue to learn and evolve with this new circumstance. But I'm positive that humanity will find a way. I'm positive that there's going to be huge benefits to the way people think about family and the prioritization. And I'm grateful from that perspective. It's given me a pause moment that, hey, I missed a lot of times away, and maybe I didn't have to fly every second week. Maybe I could have just used technology to be more effective and been more efficient with my time.
Thanks, Nick. It's really, really great insight into your business and also your thinking as a leader. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you for listening. We hope you got as much out of this as we did. If you have any feedback, we'd love to hear your thoughts at worldcoffeeportal/5THWAVE. This podcast was recorded in the one and only Serendipity Studios in glorious Camden, North London. It was produced by myself, Jeffrey Young, the World Coffee Portal team, James Harper of Filter Productions, and in sound engineering by Chris Bristow. The theme music is Cold Coffee, written by Galt McDermott and interpreted by Matt Kent for the Coffee Music Project. Have a great week, and until next time, stay safe and stay caffeinated.